This is my updated K9 Fiendsmith profile. I got second place with this recently at locals. I can confirm one thing when playing this deck. It is definitely not the best K9 variant in the room, nor is it the best deck in the room. However, I still think it works, and it's just a bit underrated in some areas. Although, that said, the format itself is, in my opinion, shaping up to be really good. I've learned a lot after the past few weeks of testing this and making adjustments, and while I still have some more to make between this and Mitsurugi Nouvelle that I want to bring, I can safely say I have enjoyed this format a lot more than previous formats in a very long time. I love the interactions, and I do like the game style. K9 has been one of the most fun decks I've had in a very hot minute now. And I'll just get into it. I'll explain some of the decisions and the choices that I decided to start adding to the deck and some things that I took out. Of course, starting off, we have 3 K917 Azuna. That's not going to change. It's the reason you play the deck. 3 K9 Jolkul and 3 K9 Lantern. And I actually cut down one of the Lupus for this build. Originally, I was one of those people that was just afraid of, if Lupus is out, then your deck doesn't do anything. In some ways, yes, it's true, but K9 Lantern is kind of the part where it's kind of okay that if Lupus gets out of rotation, that you'll be fine. Obviously, if it's DD crowed or removed somehow, banished from, or spun back, it can be very devastating. As one thing that K9 still, in my opinion, does not do very well is grind. What it does is it just burns its resources very quickly. It has a limited lifespan, which is why I incorporated the Fiendsmith. But with Lupus at 1, the second really doesn't ever come up. By the time a lot of opponents that I've gone against have gone the Lupus out of rotation, I already have Lantern for follow-up. And by that point, it won't really matter anymore. I think the second is redundant. I don't think it's like the Nightmare Pain situation for Yubel. That actually needs to fundamentally exist for that deck to do anything. But for this, it's fine. It does allow more space for the deck. And while the deck can still brick, I'm not going to deny that this deck still can brick badly. The game 1 that I had today did end in a draw. And I actually was going to just pass on Joel Cool because I couldn't do anything. But during the end of main phase, for whatever reason, he decided to do stuff. And, since I had not declared end phase yet, I was able to play, and he activated stuff. So I was able to do. K9 is not the most consistent deck to play. It is still, for the most part, a 2-card combo deck. But I found that while you don't have the infinite grind, by the time you worry about getting to that point, it doesn't really matter. The real downside to Fiendsmith K9 is ultimately, besides the fact that Fiendsmith has vulnerable choke points and you have to play the deck slightly differently than you would normally at times, it's the extra deck space that you get rid of. And you will find that well, they may not have the best synergy with each other. That's kind of okay at the same time because, well, let's say you have Jolkul and Lantern and you have yet another. You're going to break on names. Or let's say you have Jolkul and this or Lupus, whatever, and you have Lantern. Well, it's fine that if you get all that to go into your Fiendsmith stuff. The Fiendsmith stuff is supposed to eat up your interruptions and to force your opponent to interact. The K9 stuff is good enough after to do its own thing. This is true. If you don't respect the Fiendsmith or don't have an answer to it, it's a problem. While K9 itself doesn't really lose hard to hand traps, Fiendsmith does. But if Fiendsmith is not outed, it is a huge issue for them to deal with. And the grind game actually matters a lot for this too. Because like I said, K9 really doesn't have a infinite grind like a lot of other decks can. Yummy has the field spell, which can place cards back. Draco Tail, the whole thing is about generating. K9 doesn't have that innately. That's why I still am a fan of the Fiendsmith stuff. As one of the games that I won is simply because I was just able to recycle Fiendsmith entirely twice and just remake Requiem and do all that. And those decks by that point were so exhausted that they could not stop the one card combo. Is it as strong as it was last year? No. It's not. However, it's still really good. Desiree was still a huge issue. And the K9 cards themselves, while I wish, it was just a tad more consistent, I found that this ratio, at least with the Lupus being at 1, meant you can have more options to play the game. And I thought this is ultimately just fine ratios for what you're trying to go for. I'm just going to put this here. And of course, for spells, you play 3 Case of K9 and 1 K9 X Force Release. Now, I did actually take out the Release Restraint. I love both cards a lot. I like the abilities that it gives, but there's one thing that I'm picking Force Release. First of all, I think it's safer. Release Restraint is better when you have simply more extra deck space to be able to tag into. And with Jax not in, which I actually think Jax is actually a ridiculously good card for K9, with the second wave of support, where we get the Broken Machine Monster that is actually really good for Pier, which I'm very happy about, and also the K9 Jax. The thing that Jax fixes is there are many times where when you summon out your Ripper, it's not really what you want. And Hound, which I'll get into, also just isn't a great fit either, as it doesn't do anything proactive during your turn. And of course, if you go into Werewolf, yes, I'll talk about Werewolf too. But essentially, one of these options doesn't even do anything. It just becomes a pseudo tower. And then you have the Werewolf, which it's good. Yes, definitely good. And Ripper's awesome, but it's not quite enough. So, Force Release, the reason I play this over Release Restraint, even though I think Release Restraint is debatably the better card, is it has more immediate value. With this, you don't really get to exercise often too much with your value. You need every card to be able to do something. Unlike a lot of other decks where they can kind of have a tad of fluff to them, you need to be being able to be proactive, whether you need to break a board or set up an interruption, which it does. And because you don't have Jax, you don't have as much range to cover for stuff. Whereas Release Restraint, while it has more options to, target, if you're playing this deck, you're gonna almost always have a K9 XCs on the board. So Force Release is better in that regard. I do miss Release Restraint. There are times where it does, but I usually, in the first profile, I would just side out one. But Force Release, yeah, it's definitely good. And 3 Case for K9, I love this card. If this card stays on the field long enough and your opponent keeps triggering it, I actually had 2 active and it got to 18. And at that point in the game, they're just not able to walk past anything that you put out on the board. Now for Fiendsmith, we're still playing 3 Fiendsmith Engraver. We play the 1 Lacrima and the 1 Fabled Lurie. Now the difference here is I'm playing only 2 Track now, and I'm still playing the Trap. So for whatever reason, and perhaps it has been power crept, Fiendsmith definitely doesn't feel as versatile. And this is one thing that I think needs to be considered if you do want to build this, is Fiendsmith is still very good. But it doesn't have natural synergy with K9 in it. So you have to be very careful of what you're doing with it. But again, like I said in my first video, one of the things that people talk about for Fiendsmith K9 and why it's not a legitimate deck, or at least as legitimate as like Vanquisol K9 or Chris Strong K9 or even Cyber Dragon, is because Fiendsmith doesn't bridge, or Fiendsmith K9 can bridge into Fiendsmith, but Fiendsmith can't bridge into K9. And to that, I say that part doesn't matter. Ultimately, what you want in this format, based on what I've seen, is you want interactions. And at every point possible. The Fiendsmith package, first of all, helps you go second, which is something that K9 does struggle with. And you get interactions on every account. You can get naturally playing the deck. You have your Azunas in hand. You can have the Paradise set up. And with the extra deck, you have options to be able to break boards, and you really thrive in the mid game, which is something that I'm finding more and more often is the case. The simplified game states matter a big deal, and when you use all your interactions, the Fiendsmith part carries in. But so, what is the issue with Fiendsmith? Well, it's the fact that one thing I've noticed is a lot of these combos are not actually as big as they used to be. The best decks in the room right now, to me, don't play as long as other traditional combos, and they feel more insulated. Like, yes, there's still choke points. I'm not going to say that those don't exist. But, if you go against, like, K9 Duelist, they get 2 monsters on board. That's all they need. Then they can just go into any rank 5, or they can go into engine and get insulation absolutely immediately. Fiendsmith doesn't get that right away. Fiendsmith has to go through a few summons and very vulnerable choke points, mind you. Of course, since apparently Nib is not good this format, and I'm going to continue to say Nib is still really good this format. It's a very good card. You gotta respect cards like that. Just because they say Nib's not good, doesn't matter. It can bait the Nib, and Nib can end the game still. Everyone's like, Ripper doesn't make it matter. No, this is not a Phantom of Yubel situation where Phantom of Yubel did power creep Nib. Ripper's not guaranteed, whereas Phantom of Yubel, while it can only pretty much be going first, for the most part, I don't see how you'd ever summon pretty much 5 times during your opponent's turn, but whatever. Phantom of Yubel, when it was meta relevant and Yubel was doing stuff, that right there was like Nib's not as good, because that's a huge deal. But for K9, honestly, there's a lot of times where it really does hurt. So if you do go through the line, you have to force that Nib, which is fine, because Fiendsmith is totally recyclable. But you have to play long. That's kind of my whole point I'm trying to get at with the Fiendsmith stuff. Fiendsmith does help the deck go second, and it does have a lot of utility, but it does eat up a lot of the extra deck, which is a huge sacrifice that you have to account for. But while it may not have the best natural synergy, I'm going to acknowledge that. It doesn't have the best synergy with the deck. It's still not bad. And you just have to be weary and aware of the fact that you leave a lot of choke points, but you get rewarded very well if your opponents are not respecting it. And in the games that I've been playing, Fiendsmith for the most part performs fine, and it's still very good. It's probably not as good because Azuna and all that, you trigger, and there's issues. I'm not gonna say there's not issues with Fiendsmith now, but I still think ultimately, if you play it correctly, it still offers enough utility that K9 just simply doesn't have, or in my opinion, a lot of other variants don't have, that I really enjoy. And again, it's not like I can afford to get like Crystron. Crystron's very cheap right now, but I just enjoy the Fiendsmith stuff. It's not without issue, but you get more interaction points if you get to where you're going. And Fiendsmith in Paradise is actually really good this format. A lot of people won't risk playing the brick, which I understand. The deck's not the most consistent, but Fiendsmith in Paradise being dumped has won me games because my opponent will be able to play through all the interactions except for that one, and that one is a huge deal. So there's the Fiendsmith cards right there. I still stand by the same point. I still think it's good, but it definitely it's showing its power creep, which is weird. But honestly, I think a lot of what Fiendsmith is struggling with right now is just because it's not a great format for it. I think the cards themselves are still really strong. But with formats now switching to playing during both players' turns, I think Fiendsmith will struggle in that, because it has such choke points. But again, if it resolves, it's very strong. Caesar or Chaos Angel or, whatever you go from it, it's very impactful and you have the grind. 3 chaotic elements, just not changing that. Just play that over 7 Tachyon. Yeah. Now for the rest of this deck, I did change up the hand trap line, and I actually put way more emphasis on this for a multitude of reasons, but I'll show. I played 3 Fua, 3 Ash, 3 DD Crow, 2 Ogre, 2 Effect Veiler, and 2 Nib. So, obviously, the hand traps could be adjusted. There's still some things that I can do. Bell's pretty good right now. I got rid of all the other stuff because ultimately I find that talents and all that isn't the end-all be-all. When I first made the first profile, I hadn't really done as much testing as I've done now. I find, it's good, and yes, they're live, and yes, being able to talents take a Ripper is going to be phenomenal. You will find that Nash Knight is the most common summon, which is a thing of itself, but you're not really gaining anything from it because it doesn't do enough by itself. And I firmly believed that this format was not board breaker. I can't recall the last time we had an actual board breaker format that was relevant. Not board breaker deck, like Tempai. I mean a format where that was the only acceptable way. I think the hand traps feel much better. Fula is still weird, but Fula isn't as bad of a break. That's one thing I actually really like about this build. There was a one today where I had it was Necroquip. My opponent shuffled 2 Fiendsmith cards back before I could get Engraver. And I hadn't done anything that turn. It was like turn 4. So I just normal summoned Fua, and then I just went into Moon. And so I got that break out of the hand. But Fua feels pretty good. Being able to draw into Azuna feels phenomenal. Being able to draw into Nib, Effect Veiler, Ghost Ogre. DD Crow. DD Crow, it could be Cope, but I like the idea of Crow. Crow stops a lot of interactions, and you just play Effect Veiler because I think it's actually better than Imperm right now. And Ash, even though Ash is not really as impactful, it can come up. But I valued more hand traps because I just think interactions are more important than anything else this format, given the testing that I've done. We'll go with the extra deck. We have 1 K9 X Werewolf, 1 K9 Hound, and 2 K9 Rippers. So I want to just talk real quick. I have seen a lot of points made about Hound as is it viable? So some people are, I know some people straight up do not play Werewolf. Some people straight up do not play Hound. The logic for not playing Werewolf is by the time you get this card out, you've won the game. Which I don't really agree with. There's plenty of times in simplified game states where they get the one search and you just banish it, and it's a huge deal. Werewolf feels very good to resolve. But there's also a lot of people that say Hound doesn't matter. Well, Hound has 2 purposes. 1, it becomes a pseudo tower if you summon it, and 2, in a very simplified game state, if let's say we had K9666 Jax on the board, and you didn't want that, or Ripper, but Hound is you're either out of options and you want to survive the turn and get a big strong tower that can banish a card during standby phase, which helps a lot. And that's really it. But there's a skill to using Hound. In my opinion, I wouldn't feel comfortable not playing Hound in this deck. Even though it is probably the most cuttable card, I think the times when Hound becomes relevant, it's a huge deal. I have won a game off of Hound. My opponent, for whatever reason, I had already used Werewolf and Ripper. They let me, by that time I was using Release Restraint, the card right here. I was using Release Restraint, at that time, and they didn't really think anything of it. So they're like, well, okay, you know, you're not going to summon if you summon another werewolf, it doesn't matter. Summon another Ripper, it doesn't matter. So yeah, that's fine. I summon the Hound, and they can't out the card, and then during standby phase, it's a big deal because now they have to, and I'm able to pop off. But it's all about knowing how to use the cards. To me, that's the strength. Ripper is a great card. Werewolf is a great card. Hound is a great card. But you need to know when to use each of these cards. They don't feel like I auto-win. And Hound is very good in simplified game states. In fact, probably more so than Ripper or Werewolf. And oftentimes, Werewolf helps clinch games or stop your opponent's turn. Ripper is interaction and duo drive if your opponent just wants to play into the card. But Hound is the only one, in my opinion, that actually really feels like, okay, well, if I don't deal with this card, my opponent gets another turn, worst case scenario, and if I don't deal with it, I lose something during the standby phase, which is big. So I like Hound, and I think Werewolf is also really good, and I like this ratio. I am excited for the new Xyz because I think it will add a lot to the current state of K9. And it'll be that extra interaction that is so important right now. Valon, Nash, and I'm still playing the number. Again, you have to make space for the Fiendsmith stuff, but Valon feels really good, and Nash Knight feels really good too. Valon is actually kind of a crazy card. I know that's shocker, but you know, there's been a lot of games when I first played that I wasn't making this. This card's actually really good. The fact that even if you bounce and if you book a moon something and then it gets sent and you get to still, that to me is just ridiculous and makes this card very playable. It has the threat. There's a lot of decks that want to keep at least one card in the back row that they might set, and then you can just deal with that too. So even if it leaves the board, you still get something with it. Nash Knight, I think, goes without saying. It's one of the craziest format warping cards in a hot minute. Then, of course, you got your Fiendsmith, you got your Desiree, Necroquip, Requiem, Moon, Sequence, On Gun Day, Chaos Angel, and Highway. Chaos Angel has felt phenomenal, and there's not very many times where I miss SP over it. Chaos Angel deals with quite a few monsters. When you go second, your opponents will often think you're just going to go Desiree climbing, but Chaos Angel's not really that played right now, at least from the list that I see. So when you drop a random Chaos Angel, it's unaffected by monster effects, which is huge. And that's kind of the reason why I think it's great, because right now monster effects are everything. It just gets that. And of course, with the spot removal of Engraver, you have that other option of interaction. You got Caesar as something to end on, and Desiree. I make both all the time, and you know, you can just recycle most of this minus these two. But yes, you have options to be able to get a grind game. And that's the thing I want. That's the thing I value a lot right now, is you're not really going to just win because you're end board. You were going to grind with your opponent. Phrasing. So there's that. As for the side, I haven't really drawn into many sides. This is probably still the most debatable area, but I'm playing currently 2 Phantasme. I have yet to actually summon this, but in person anyway. I like the idea of it, and I also can really hurt going against Yummy, so that's really nice. Being able to +1 and get a big, strong body on the board is also really good, and being able to get that targeting protection. So I have 2 of Phantasme, 3 Lancia. This card is nuts. That card's ridiculous. There's so many random decks still that like to banish cards, and just being able to do that, you can just shut them off. And you know, you can use it defensively too. There's such great applications. Lancia should be in your side deck for the rest of the year. Or until we see what happens in the September ban list, when we'll see what happens. We honestly have to see, but Lancia feels really good. 3 Droll as well. you gotta still respect those decks that want to play traditional and they want to draw a bunch of cards or search for a bunch of cards. It's also still really good against Rizio if you see that variation. Um, yeah, Lancia currently is the best card that I've just been able to use in the side deck. 3 Teshira Fenrir. I've seen a lot of people starting to play this. I'm conflicted. I love Cash. But my thing with Cash, Fenrir, in this particular instance, I don't want to main deck it because if you get Azuna, Fenrir's dead and it's not going to do anything. It feels better when you can, side this in and summon it yourself, and then it generates resource, and of course you get advantage with it, and the board's clear, you can summon another. That's fine. And also deals with a lot of boards because it's just very tricky because it will pretty much get value out of it. I actually still think Pankratops is a better choice this format than Fenrir. I just think Fenrir is safer, but Pankratops under corrections is just better in most cases. But I still, any chance to play Cash, I will play Cash. So that's really that for me. And then the final 2 or 4 cards. I play 2 spells, Soul Exchange, and 2 Droplet. So, Droplet, I should have been playing. Droplet feels really good this format. And with K9, sometimes there's just hands where you might have a Lantern, but you might have like a Zuna or something, and it's not live. You do the Droplet, and now Lantern's live, and it also breaks into boards, and applies pressure. And then for Soul Exchange, the reason I'm still trying with this is because you play enough high-level monsters where this is fine. If you have to normal summon the Engraver by tributing something on their board, first of all, this can just be bait. It's a free bait card. Secondly, if it does resolve, it's huge because it deals with unaffected cards. So you can tribute one of their cards, and if it's Engraver, then you can just go 1-card combo. And now you have essentially put a lot of pressure. And of course, with the K9 stuff, there's just so many times you break. So sometimes you have the Soul Exchange. You might have to normal summon one, or whatever. You have the Soul Exchange to tribute, and then get the other one on. Whatever. You play enough high level names where it does matter. It's not as impactful as something like Monarch, but being able to just out one card is pretty good. And yeah, I'm still a big fan of it. One of these days I'll actually be able to do it and see if it's as good as I say. But yeah, that's my updated K9 Fiendsmith list. I'm still a big fan of this format. Losing dice roll doesn't feel as daunting. It doesn't feel like, oh, I don't have a chance to play the game. And I think right now K9 Fiendsmith is still fine. Again, I know for a fact it's not the best version of K9, but I have seen some moderate success with it, and if played well, you'd get to do some things the other decks in the room don't get to really do. Fiendsmith does still add a lot of value to the K9 stuff, and K9 feels insanely fun to play. I love the cards, and I love the playstyle of the deck. But yeah, that's my updated K9 Fiendsmith list. Please let me know what you think. What are your thoughts on the format? Have you seen any success with something similar? Please let me know. Thank you so much.